Welcome to another episode of Movie Talk with the brothers Krynn. How are you guys doing today?
Well, we're on the show again because I always love chatting with you and Jen about movies and stuff. Best part of my Sundays
Well, Saturdays or
and
Sundays.
weekends.
Sometime in the weekend.
Saturdays. Yeah, sorry. My brain's turned off this weekend. There was so much work we had to do,
No, it's okay.
and like, and yesterday I spent a part of it also sick while working, so wasn't much fun. Yeah. So yeah, it's the best part of my weekends.
I had I think what was it? The last time we did this, whatever, I got stuck having to change a kid's diaper, so I forgot to turn the stream off. So there's a 4-hour long stream that I got to cut down to an hour 30. I was like, this is more work than I need.
It's at least it's recorded for all posterity, and at least you have evidence that you take care of the kids. Well, there's proof he does love them.
Ugh. That was a rough week. So there was today's episode, we are talking about Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which, if I remember correctly, this was like 1989, wasn't it?
I think 87.
Okay. It released in the States on May 24th of 89.
You see, no, it was 89. Yeah,
okay,
89, like you said.
Yeah, I remember because when I watched a video or watched a movie yesterday while I was drawing, and I was like, this is 89? That doesn't make any sense. Like, I feel like it was later than that, like at least 93 or something like that.
I thought it was earlier than that. I thought it was 1876. No, then you basically just said like that entire Treaty of Westphalia joke. It's like I thought it was yours. I thought it was yours. Well, we knew it was somewhere on the continent and just didn't give a tosh. Really. That was your stance just now. Yeah, but you knew it was sometime in the 80s. You just didn't care when.
But yeah, it was
this movie.
Definitely was an 80s film.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I was young, I watched this Into the Ground with my dad, and then watched it Into the Ground as an adult every year. Like it was like 3 times a year after he passed away. So I kind of know this movie a little well.
It's a hell of a father-son film to watch with your dad, though. So I get it.
Yeah. But there's other movies which I used to watch quite often with him. I can't really watch because, like sometimes you miss him too much.
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
I get that. Like there's some things that my mom and I kind of experience. So it gets a little bit emotional, like when I go back to those things. But other than, I get it. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like, well, for us, it's been 17 years, and sometimes it doesn't get any easier.
No, I don't think it really ever goes away.
No, it doesn't. Actually, earlier I ended up talking with someone reviewing our books, our Irish novel, which was one of my first, and I based a character off our mémère, our dad's mom, who died 2 years before he did, and we were very close with her. I was really close to her, and one of the characters was based off her. And the guy was asking me a lot of questions about the character, and I kind of got choked up. Didn't cry, but just I eventually changed the topic because I didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
With him, it's just I just simply said I don't. When he tried to just say, well, what about the character? I just want to know this other thing about her. I said, listen, she's based off my grandmother. I don't know. And he's like, okay, never mind. So it's like I did have to actually come clean and say, no, I can't.
That's okay. I mean,
because you have there are losses like that that don't get any easier. And loss is really, I would argue, in a way at the heart of this movie.
Hmm.
Because the thing is, the Henry Jones Sr., who lives in Utah, um, is someone who, while he raised his son really well, I do say he raised his son really well only because his son turned into an upstanding young man. But the thing is, and an amazing scholar. But the problem is, he lost his wife probably not long after Indy was born. So, the much as Indy says, I just wanted my dad. Like, there's also a sense that Indy didn't grow up in a household with a mother. So the only parent he ever had was his dad, and his dad was still, you know,
Invested in,
grieving for his
yeah.
wife.
He
Yeah.
it seems
So
like he buried himself in his work mainly to get over that hurt.
yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. And speaking of someone who's done that in the past, it's not actually a solution. You're just delaying the pain
Fair.
till you can actually handle it and manage it. It's extended suffering, is what it is.
That's fair. That's
And
fair.
it's but the trouble is, Indy's dad wasn't ready to raise a child alone. And as we see, like, he barely knows how to get by on his own. What does he know about raising a child? Especially one who's as much of an emotional basket case as Henry Jones Jr. And I
They
say that from a place of love.
yeah, they grieve differently. Pretty much.
Yeah, because the difference is, they're both confrontational, but Indy is obnoxious and headstrong. In a way, um, there's something very interesting about the culture here as well, because Indy's father belongs very much to an older generation where um, you would kind of I don't want to say repress, but you'd kind of have that stiff upper. And we got to bear in mind, his dad, because it's Sean Connery, is basically from Great Britain. He's a first generation migrant.
Hmm.
And he comes from Great Britain from the Victorian period, where you did have a stiff upper lip. You didn't complain, you toughened up.
Hmm.
But the thing is, Indy is American. So Indy's from a generation where, yeah, he felt you had to tackle your pain and sorrow and you have to throw yourself against it and conquer it. But at the same time, um, Indy is someone who uh, he's honest with himself. Like, let's be honest, he's honest with himself. His dad, in a way, is someone who, when he enters the building, he's the center of attention. Not that he's a narcissist, it's just he's got a powerful personality. So people gravitate more to him than, to an extent, Indy. And it's just, you know what I mean? Like, uh, Indy was in the shadow, and his dad was this brilliant professor who everyone knew and everyone revered, I
Except for
imagine.
him.
At least yeah. And this father and him have come from two totally different generations. It's the equivalent of the Boomer Gen Y disagreement. You know what I mean? Or like the Zoomer and the Boomers.
Yeah,
Or
I've seen
uh,
a lot of that play out on Twitter, and I'm just I as a Gen Xer, I'm like, I see where both sides are coming from, but like, kind of have to
same.
make your own path. It's like,
Yeah. Now you got to bear in, like, we're Gen Y, but on est français. We're Gen Y from a French culture. So uh, how do I put it? But we have Anglophone relatives, so
mhm,
we kind of see, like the bootstrap boomer thing.
mhm.
We have some English relatives like that. I say English, but I mean Anglo Canadian. So, but we're French. Our boomers are totally different.
Hmm.
They're more obsessed with cheese, um, and and maybe, I don't know, the whole Little Mermaid stereotype with the one chef. That's basically our boomers.
Hmm.
Joking, but like, honestly, I didn't even know there was a conflict with until I first came to Twitter like a few years ago.
I feel like
had no idea.
90% of that argument is, why didn't you do this for us when blah blah, or show us how to do this? And this is similar. I've seen this play out in another situation too, because the Black community had something like this in the late 90s to mid early 2000s. But why didn't you? Yeah. It's the there's so many like older Black successful men or whatever, and a lot of the younger generation felt like they should have actually gave us the opportunities to make the same strides and make the same successes that they did, which is it's a similar argument to this. But the thing is like, it's a cultural thing, so it's not like it's right out in the open. It's kind of one of those things where you have to be there. But
I wonder if maybe it's because the Black population maybe they're aging faster, and they were like a few years in advance of this.
That, and it is only 13% of the population, so it's a smaller contingent, but it's the same problem, just spread out across like the different demographics. My argument mainly with that is that the time that people spend complaining about what the previous generation didn't do for them, you could be taking that opportunity to actually do for yourselves.
Yeah. For example, actually, one example, Dan and I never learned a lot of, we didn't learn a lot of things like on making a road, for example, but we just recently got hired for construction. So we're going to be learning a little about how roads are made.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I always complained, I wish I knew how the Romans made their roads or something. Well, we're going to get a bit of a crash course.
Oh, awesome.
As manual lead.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of neat. My only complaint was it's only like a 2 or 3 month contract.
I see.
So yeah, you see, my complaint is, well, I would rather it be with someone who will take us on for like the next dozen years, because I'd like something long term, not short term.
The silver lining to that, though, is at least you have the experience to carry over into additional jobs if you want to continue that.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is, there's a very short window, because in Canada, winter leaves quick and comes back really quick.
Yeah.
And you can't really do this in the fall.
Yeah.
A lot of construction work has to be done in the few summer months we have.
I've been in Canada right around September, and it got super cold around the beginning of September.
Yeah, so you know.
And it doesn't help that with roads, sometimes with the way the cold operates, that's another reason why often our roads crack.
Yeah.
And we get so much pothole. Because it's a big nation, and it's hard to...
But the thing is, the solution would be to give the municipal governments more power, but the federal doesn't like that idea. Because if the municipal has more power, they can hire more people on a local level.
Yeah.
And handle the problem. The federal government doesn't want to do that.
So you guys are dealing with what we were dealing with before our current administration.
Yeah, that's an apt description, I think. But I think when it comes to this movie, it's exactly like you described. It's a general thing, kerfuffle. And I don't know if kerfuffle is a good word, or even a word, but it's and if people are going to make fun of me, sue me. It's my godmother a few years ago, that our mom, who's an Anglophone. But the thing is, the movie starts off with Indy, developing the attitude that Crusade belongs at a museum. And to which my highly Catholic self will scream at him and say, "No, doesn't it? No, it belongs to God and the church." And I'm joking.
It's one of those things where it's like the museum probably wouldn't do that well in a museum anyways, considering like just the things that you've heard over time. There's a thing that recently that we found out about where supposedly there's rumors that the Smithsonian had like found some artifacts that ran counter to just the current thinking. So there's rumors that they actually burned those artifacts as to not like ruffle feathers or change things.
I have no idea.
I don't know if that's real or not, but if that sounds like something, I wouldn't put it past people.
I have heard that most artifacts from archaeological digs are found thing. It's likely that the cross, no one, it'll probably be put in storage and probably won't be seen for the next 200 years.
Oh, like the Ark of the Covenant. Okay.
Yeah. Well, museums. I have a special place in my heart for museums because whenever I go abroad, I always tour the museum.
I love museums too,
but we do have to be aware that sometimes you have bad management. Sometimes you have good.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the fault of the people that are passionate about history. It's the fault of the management cycle, which every place has bad management.
But I will defend America here in the early 20th century because at the time, well, we know for a fact. I also have read some of the journals and letters and whatnot. Some people from mostly Texas, because Woody Howard and whatnot, and Mark Twain. I was curious about them.
Mm-hmm.
And American museums were pretty good at the time. And American museums were in competition with those of the British and the French and others.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like nowadays, the best museums are probably in Japan. They do the most history. But at the time, it was the British Empire, which did the most work to preserve history.
Mm-hmm.
But the U.S. was actively in competition because you Americans wanted to increase the material possession and material knowledge of other civilizations and whatnot. So in this regard, no matter the criticism one might have, there were a lot of Americans at the time hard at work with doing this sort of thing. And archaeology was something that the Anglosphere did a lot of. And when I say the Anglosphere, it's usually most people now mean it to mean like the Kansa groups of nations, but I'm going to extend it to say also the US here. Like there was a big race to preserve stuff, but the trouble is with Australia, Canada, and New Zealand is a lot of times they just send the artifact back to Britain because Mama Britain needed it. Well, but the trouble is, like Britain would decide where it went, even if it was something that was already in a Canadian museum. In that regard, America would just say, listen, if it's in Nebraska, leave it in freaking Nebraska. Or at most, we'll move it to New York. It's not, we're going to move it across like 2 oceans, which seems to me a little insane. But, or at least pointless to me, because like just leave it in Australia. It's easier to just transport someone from Britain to Australia to visit it if he really wants to. No need to, anyways. But sorry, I was a history major, so a lot of this I will bitch and moan about because
no, that's fine.
Like I was basically following an indie at one point to an extent, and like, oh man. Although I disagreed with indie to an extent at the time, I was like, no, history is better read in the library than out in the field. So I was more like Henry Jones than indie, and now I'm like in the middle.
Now that you made that statement, it kind of reminds me of that's another parallel of running counter to his father's like path in life. To where his father was more scholarly, he's more an in the field type of guy.
Yeah, and we see that in the beginning. And what I like is the introduction to the snake phobia.
Well, yeah, he wasn't afraid of snakes until the circus train. Like circus train really screwed him up.
Yeah, but what I like is that although the thief gets the better of him, I like how the guy, like, there's something interesting that happens where the thief takes his hat off and is like, "Better luck next time, kid," and puts the hat that later is Indy's on his head.
That's what I love the most about this movie. Like I haven't seen this movie in years, and I actually went back and watched it yesterday, and that scene in particular, I was like, wait, hold up, this is actually good. Well, I see why they went with the young Indiana Jones concept later on down the line. Yeah. But that line in particular where I can't, what's that guy's name? His name is Garth, and apparently Garth just says like, today you lost, but you don't have to take it. And I was like, that's the whole crux of Indy's personality right there. It's like he loses, his win-loss ratio is pretty kind of in the middle, but for all of his losses, whatever, he still perseveres, and that's one of the biggest aspects of his personality too.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely something of a almost underdog attitude about that, and I would almost argue there's something almost Irish or Scottish about that. You lost, but it doesn't mean you have to take it. And I just say because the Irish and the Scots and conflicts against the English, and yet towards the end of the medieval period, the Scots were the ones who beat the English at one point, and it's the Scots who got the royal family on the English throne. So technically, the Scots conquered England. Just because they kept losing didn't mean they had to take it. So. Well, you and I are, all three of us, full screen, are of Scottish descent, so we get that moment of just going to the English,
and you have the Irish as well. Like Willie said, it's like the British against the Irish. It's like the Scots against the Irish, and the other Irish against the Irish.
No, it's it's like the Scots.
Yeah. I know.
But the Irish are the same way.
It is hilarious. Like our family tree. I think my dad went to research our family tree, and my mother already had her family tree research. So my mother's side has German lineage, and my father's side's like Scottish. So I was like, "What the hell happened?"
But then we get to Indy as an adult. And he receives his father's journal, which I love the role of this.
Don't skip over the fact that he actually goes back and gets the Cross of Coronado from the. So he gets that. Yeah. He does get the win. It was just, it took him like another 15 years?
20 years. No, it was 1912 when.
Yeah, 1938 is when. Yeah. So 1912 to 1938.
It took him 26 years, but he got the win. Talk about stubborn. He dedicated his entire life to getting even with those guys. And I thought Medea had a chip on her shoulder.
Yeah. One thing that I did find interesting was his one lecture about facts and truth. How here it is. Archaeology is about facts. If you want truth, go sign up for a philosophy class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think which this enters into one core difference between the father and the son. The father is a Catholic. The son's an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
You have a clear difference between these two men. Because the Christian idea is that truth, it's just another name for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I am the truth, I am the way, I'm the life.
The irony,
Indy looks at it differently.
Yeah, I want to point out the irony, though, of him being an atheist, considering the things that he's seen so far to this point. Because he did witness the Ark of the Covenant being opened and the power of God basically destroying a human being. So it's one of those things where it's like, how are you still an atheist when you have witnessed this?
I think that's one of the few plot holes in the movie.
Well, I guess it resolves itself towards the end, but that's like a whole nother that's a whole that's a later segment of this.
Yeah. I was going to say, this is something which I hope people don't burn me at the stake for this. I've noticed more of Steven Spielberg. Some of these sort of plot holes and character plot holes, I should say, or the character amnesia and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Spielberg sometimes has these moments. Now, people have said Lucas does, but Lucas doesn't. I've noticed Lucas has a really damn good memory for continuity. And this is one of the differences between the two. One is a continuity schmuck. The other is not. And I say schmuck, I mean Lucas. So it's one of those things. I think you could, because this was a co-production with these two.
Yeah, as
you can
always.
See, you could see I would argue the obsession Lucas had with continuity in the hat, the crucifix. These are George obsessing about those little details, while Spielberg forgets. By even George Lucas, to an extent, I think may have forgotten. It's possible.
I think
with Indy being an atheist,
I've kind of relegate this to plot convenience.
But it's a bit of a problem. But the thing with these Indiana Jones movies is that they have a certain swashbuckling tone. They are setting up, in a way, a genre. And you have the Mummy, you have Tomb Raider, you've got Librarian series. They'll be following in the footsteps.
Yeah.
But the formula has not been perfected. And yeah, plot convenience comes to an extent. But I'm not trying to bash the movie. I'm just
no. This is purely observational. But yeah, I do notice, now that you mention it, there are themes, say the father-child theme that gets redone in Tomb Raider, the first Tomb Raider movie, where Laura's reconciling. Laura's reconciling with her father for all the things came up missing. Same plot. Came up missing. They went looking for him. They meet. They actually resolve their conflict and they move on from there.
Yeah. There's also the second Librarian movie. Well, there's a second Librarian movie where the dad's dead, but Flynn's basically chasing his shadow. You know what I mean? Trying to reconcile with the father he never knew, and trying to get to know him via journal and via. Well, he knew his father, but it's just he died when he was a young child, so he's trying to, by continuing the archaeological search, dad started. He's kind of, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
following in his footsteps and trying to know him.
He doesn't have that closure of being an adult and actually having a conversation, or being a young adult and getting to know your father past the child rearing phase. Because everybody has that.
Although, Indy and Henry have not spoken in years now.
Yeah.
And Walter Donovan ends up tasking Indy with finding Henry and the Grail.
Yeah.
And of course, Indy receives Daddy's journal, which contains his life's work on the Holy Grail. It's pretty convenient that, just how much Henry discovered.
No, what was it? The last 26 years he spent researching it?
Yeah, but even then, I don't know. I'm
that is a lot of
that's
a lot of information. Yeah.
Well,
I think
that's the Celtic version of it. But as for the Holy Grail, at least he made it past the one bunny. It's the rats he couldn't get past. I have to crack these jokes.
They were rats.
Yeah, I love that joke. It's hard to imagine Sean Connery at all being afraid of rats, considering he's Bond, James Bond.
Considering the Indiana Jones himself is afraid of snakes, he had to have some sort of character flaw or major phobia.
Yeah, that's fair. And then the son's gonna end up scared of scorpions.
After seeing that whole thing with the train, though, I get it. If I would have fell all in the entire pit of snakes, I would have lost my shit too.
That's fair. And of course, indie. Well, I like the library part where the X marks the spot.
Yeah, there are no X's that marks the spot. X marks the spot.
Yeah, and it's a little bit on the nose, but then they descend into the catacomb to find the inscribed shield.
I thought
But
that was
it's
really cool, actually.
also interesting. Yeah, it's also interesting how many of these sort of movies, these I'm going to say these kind of semi pulp swashbucklers,
Mm-hmm.
have the characters descending into into a tomb or a catacomb that leads into a tomb. They always do it that way, and it's really cool that they used this, because this thing is in the first Indiana Jones and the second, but it's one of those repetitions I like. I've yet to see one of these movies where it's like, oh well, they didn't do the tomb, like what I mean is they did the tomb, and I'm disappointed, or they didn't. Every time they don't do it, I'm kind of annoyed because it's like just do it.
That's so key. That's a core element of like these types of movies or these types of experiences. It's like Temple of Doom. I know people don't like Temple of Doom in the trilogy, but actually, I thought Temple of Doom was the coolest for the fact that there's a whole like just secret passageway that leads to an underground mine and cult ritual altar.
It reminded me also of how, ironically, some Abbott and Costello movies had those kind of hidden tunnels.
Oh, the secret passageways.
Yeah, and I just think, I agree. That was a cool.
I always, as a kid, I've always wanted to. If I ever got a house, I want to get a house with those secret passageways or like the secret elevators or whatever. But obviously, those things are a fortune now because the housing market's complete shite. So it is what it is. But maybe one day I'll hit the lottery and get one of those.
We all dream of having
Wayne Manor
with secret passageways and everything.
Yeah.
I just want Countess of Dracula, honestly.
Oh, that's fair. It's in Europe, so that'd probably be a little better than Wayne Manor.
Yeah, you can't really bring it back to the States piece by piece like gargoyles.
No. Oh boy. Like just what David Xantos did, and I love his line. Come on, Owen, you know the answer to that. Pay a man enough, and he'll walk barefoot into hell.
That is a great line, and people swore up and down that was like he was quoting Shakespeare, and it's like, no, that's straight up David Xanatos.
Yeah. Like, not to mention, I was just gonna say, like, Europe's where there's all the best food, and there's castles and museums and cathedrals and whatnot.
It's like all the interesting historical stuff. Really,
Asia has that stuff too, and it's like, it's why it's like, well, why couldn't like, a part of me is like, why didn't we ever build stuff like that up in North America?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like
the most robust historical stuff we have is like old plantation houses and like certain Victorian style homes that have secret passages and stuff. But you got to go like you got to go to like the South. I got to move back to Virginia and go do all that.
Or you have to go to Quebec City.
I will say though that there's a lot of people that died due to like the war in Virginia. So there's a lot of like hauntings and like kind of really spooky shit that goes on over there.
But that's pretty cool. And like, that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something which I just find, like, there's that in the South. There's Quebec City has some history to it.
I mean, we do have the oldest cathedral in North America from the 1600s
in any of the Americas. But the problem is, it's still not Europe.
Fair.
With all of its castles, cathedrals, and history.
Yeah, there's a lot more robust historical stuff that went on before. Like, America's only like 250 years old, give or take.
Yeah, in Canada, considering it's descended from Nouvelle-France, through Quebec, it's basically almost 400 years old.
Yeah.
Um, but the trouble is, that's still nothing on like 12 to like 2,000 years of history to 4,000 years with some countries like Greece, which is almost 4,000 years old, which you're like all that history. Yeah, my Henry Jones side is showing. For me, the Holy Grail is over in like France or Greece, Scotland or something. But of course, he meets Elsa Schneider, um, which is just the name Schneider. I always think that he punched her in the Schneider or in the Schnitzel or something.
It's
It's just
the love interest slash
yeah,
complicated love interest.
yeah, and honestly, she's both funny and repulsive.
That's about right.
Yeah,
She does a lot of tonal.
because
She's like tonal whiplash to person.
yeah, you took the words right out of mine. Like just the when she does betray Indy at the castle, and like the later line from Henry Jones and Indy where it's just, "Hey, I'm as human as the next man. I was the next man." And you have the dad just utterly embarrassed by that. Look, but the fact that she slept with him, okay, admittedly, I know James Bond gets around. Like, she slept with what was essentially a crusty old professor.
It's the accent.
Yeah.
It's the accent.
Yeah, it's the accent. It must have. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll admit, when I've met Scottish women I've kind of been drawn in.
No, I get it.
No matter the age. But
I get it. If I were single and I were like just hanging around Europe and I came across a fiery redheaded Scottish woman, I'd give in.
Yeah, I would. That or one who speaks with that silky French accent.
That's about right. I probably would too.
But the trouble is, yeah. But the trouble is, Elsa, on the other hand, yeah, she slept with the father, then sleeps with the son. It's just, the hell is wrong with you?
So,
and of course,
Jerry
she's
Springer.
weeping about, Jerry Springer the movie.
Oh.
And then she weeps over the. Okay, we have to talk about the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
The book burning, the Weimar book burning. So apparently, like how the media always loves to portray this is as, oh, it's so horrible what happened. How could they burn books? What could be
burning knowledge?
But the Germans were basically burning the Weimar porn stash. I think someone worded it on Twitter. It's like,
yeah, there were some things that came out to where some of the books were actually kind of the stuff that we're dealing with now with gender theory and like transgenderism and queer stuff, whatever. So like in hindsight, now that people are now that we've gone through what we've gone through with the whole culture war thing, it kind of raises some interesting questions about the whether the Weimar book burning was justified or not. Now, I'm not going to, again, I like to throw out information and let people decide for themselves how they feel on that, because I think that's more of a that leads to more interesting conversations. But
but I'm just gonna totally come out and say I support them. Like,
yeah, okay.
But Elsa crying over them, it raises questions about her.
Well, she's already of loose morals, so.
Yeah.
Loose being the operative.
But she's not just loose with her morale. She's loose in other ways.
Well, I mean, she's over here getting London bridged by a father-son duo, so.
Yeah, that's a polite way of putting it. Except it's not London Bridge which went down.
Might be the whole thing.
Hey-o.
Yeah. But yeah, Elsa's a bit of a yeah. And although I will admit the whole book signing and autograph thing is still hilarious.
Yeah, that is hilarious. I thought that was funny. It's like now you have your diary with all the information about the Holy Grail is signed by Adolf Hitler. Now it's like doubled in value for any historical anybody that's willing to collect that historical artifact.
Why? He distributed his handwriting like.
Well, I mean, now if you were to find it at like an Antiques Roadshow or something, like, yes, this is the diary of Henry Jones Sr. and it's signed by Adolf Hitler. That's a interesting thing. Like, how much would you offer for that?
$5? I don't really care.
$5 now. Well, not now. That's now that he's like long gone or whatever. It would have some historical significance to it, I'm sure.
Fair. I stand corrected. But
just a tad.
Like, yeah, autographs don't mean much to me.
Yeah, they don't mean dilly squat ultimately.
Yeah, although the fact that, yeah, I do know, however, there are those who value well, I'll just say the Austrian painter man. Some people I know on Substack have dubbed him.
Yeah, I have
as a bit of a joke.
I have an autograph of I have Lynn Swann's autograph. He was he played for the I want to say the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I have like the Barbarians autograph. But I mean, it's not like I'm really going to Antiques Roadshow with those and saying, okay, I'm going to make a mint off of it. It's just kind of like something cool to have.
Yeah. That's baseball?
Lynn Swann's Pittsburgh Steelers is football, and the Barbarians, he's a wrestler.
Well,
yeah.
I almost understand that more.
Yeah.
Because
cultural significance.
That's the thing. Like, I know there's an entire culture. Yeah, it's like I know there's a whole thing about being autographed and whatnot.
Yeah.
I get that a lot more. I guess it's just because I deal in medieval history, and I had to learn how I had to actually learn how they did their calligraphy and look at the calligraphy and handwriting of some kings, and you just kind of, I guess it desensitized me because a lot of them would just sign their seal and whatnot on every charter put in front of them and whatnot, so that we have thousands of copies of like their handwriting work. If it's Charlemagne's handwriting, I'll certainly care.
It kind of this conversation kind of reminds me of the Henry getting mad about smashing the Ming vase and then realizing it was counterfeit.
Yeah, it's like, oh, counterfeit.
Oh, thank God.
And he just took the Lord's name in vain. The son of a gun. But I'm joking. But yeah, like the entire castle scene is one of the best setups and payoff in cinematic history, because like just her luring him in, the betrayal, and even like the kiss and whatnot with, it's like, oh, why, thank you. And it's like, and, like, I had a great time when we spent the night together. And you've got like, why, thank you. I did as well. And Indy just looking disgusted and horrified. Who could blame him?
Nobody wants to think about their parents having sex.
Especially with their own girlfriend.
Yeah.
I mean, let's not introduce her to Mutt.
Yeah.
Does edifice ring a bell?
Yeah. But then, like and then you got the whole fire and the, like just having Sean Connery play a clumsy character was funny.
The trapdoor sequence, yeah.
Starts the fire.
Or the fireplace.
Yeah, like the entire setup and payoff. This was just such great comedy, but also like just as a set piece, like what happens and one thing leading to the next. And
Yes, yes.
it is like even from Indy going through the window, everything. It's so freaking well done.
It's peak.
Just
yeah.
like the boat chase. It's peak. This is how you do it.
Oh yeah, with Kazim. I actually like and that was another thing. So Kazim, who he almost kills by putting into the rotor, I didn't think about it until I watched the movie yesterday, but same type of premise as with the secret sect that protects the world from Imhotep and the Mummy. Didn't think about it like that until the Grill Protectors sequence. And I was like, wait,
Yeah.
they're the same types of groups. Just different sects or different types of protection.
Yeah. And protection is what I hope Indy used with Elsa.
Oh.
Okay, I couldn't use that job.
Well,
I have the job.
To be fair, well, what STDs would? Well, I guess chlamydia. At least that's curable. Penicillin exists, so it'll be fine. He'll be fine.
Okay, fair.
I mean, with Elsa, there are some places where even Matahari wouldn't go.
Yeah.
Ooh, ouch.
Like we have to criticize Elsa at every opportunity because it's low hanging fruit.
Fair.
It's just too easy.
Like her, yes.
But yeah, like I said, I love the castle part of the movie. It and the Zeppelin are the best parts of this movie, but that's jumping a little ahead.
Not too far ahead. It's the Zeppelin scene's right after the Hitler autograph scene. So
yeah, and they've got the Hitler scene itself comes after they kind of have to escape from the Germans, and they take to the road and whatnot.
They have to go right back to where they started. Yeah. Do you want them to have the book?
Yeah, it's like, come on, Dad. Like, well, it's like, can't you just remember? I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to. Which I'm actually going to be honest. I've worked and studied in history departments and whatnot, and for a chunk of my life, and that is how actually most of us think. We write it down so we don't have to remember every detail. Now, a lot of us remember a frightening amount of detail about history. Dan's nodding his head vigorously. Yeah, this is where I will boast a little. I think I do surprise even you with my memory for history. But then when I'm asked, what'd you eat for lunch, Joe? I had a pizza or something. And there have been times like, I think I've had a pizza. No, Joe, you had a steak. Oh, well, it was a delightful steak. And I don't, it's just my memory, like, but you ask me like, you asked me the details about, let's say, some of the military campaigns of Charlemagne or Caesar or Augustus's political policies. I can answer.
Yeah, that's a human thing. That's a human thing. We have if we lock in, we have great long-term memory, but our short-term memory is just crap.
And I get that, because with me, I have memory issues. I'm aware. That's why I write everything down. But here it is. It's like I can't remember a conversation I had 5 minutes ago, but I could probably quote a conversation I had a year ago.
Yeah, that's because of how your memory works due to the epilepsy.
Yeah, my long-term memory evolved to supplant the short-term memory part of the hippocampus in order for it to adapt for me to survive.
Yep. And the thing with Henry Jones is that it's a very historical thing. And I remember in my undergraduate time, at the university, well, that was a stupid statement. When I was studying for my undergraduate, I remember someone asking, "Don't you remember this part of history?" And I think it was of oh, right, it was of the Canadian and American junior, right? Yeah, junior associate professor, and like he was basically a lecturer, and because we had a junior and a senior professor on Canadian and American history, because the
Mhm.
head of the entire department was a senior lecturer on everything, and there was the up and coming star of the department who was the junior, and one was a student to the other. But the thing is, the junior guy just simply said, when he was asked, like, "Don't you remember this part of British history?" And he said, "One, it's not actually my special. I'm a Canadian and American history major, and I'm covering this because there's no one else who can take this course. Well, who could teach you this course at this time. And
Mhm.
honestly, I take notes and I write these things down so I don't have to." And he then just simply he was never a guy to snipe. He was really nice, but he just looked at the person and said, "This might be a hint for you to write things down and take out that notebook first. I know you got one in your backpack. Take it out. If you take the notes, you'll remember it later because you'll have it right in front."
Yeah.
And it was just such a great comeback.
And people wonder why I always like multiple choice questions in a test.
Yeah, but anyways, sorry, just let's not even get into that. But
Yeah.
the thing with Henry Jones is it is such a scholar response, and this is something that, like, in a lot of circles I deal in these days, I meet a lot of people who are like, bloody scholars or academics, and I understand. A lot of the problems that we're dealing with the whole, I'll say, Weimar problem, is essentially academics getting high on their own farts. But the thing is, we have to bear in mind
Hmm.
scholars, to contrast them with academics, make valuable contributions, but they're often a little bubble brained, like artists, about like other things. But there is a practical side even to this. The writing things down is because, like you said, we have amazing memory to lock in on certain details,
Mhm.
but it's a added like ammo clip when you write it down just in case.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so Henry is also getting older, so he knows his memory is not as sharp as it was probably 40 years ago
Fair.
or 26 years ago. So he's got a cover for that. That's why he was spending his entire life noting every detail down, is because he has to. And like when I do my book club podcasts or history podcasts, I either have the book right in front of me and I'm following a finger on the actual sentences, or no, actually, I'm doing that and I have my own notebook right here
Mhm.
with all the details noted and the page number and everything. And this is just a habit I developed. So, like, I'll be honest, in a lot of ways, I do relate to him. It's it's hard not to.
And it's also why sometimes, oh, we have to do a reading for a review or a podcast. I often do the reading the day of, so that way it's fresh in my mind.
While
Okay.
I end up reading it ahead and giving it, yeah. But Indiana um, then proceeds to um, say the name of our Lord in a blasphemous way and
Gets
gets a
slapped.
slap for it, is told that's for blasphemy. Um, Now, I know someone on Twitter, Isaac Young, has criticized this aspect of the movie, and he said um, this is where, on his most recent view, because as a youngster he really liked it, but then as he's gotten older, he said there's a problem here because it's not just Indiana Jones who's an atheist, but the thing is, the directors or and whatnot are like Lucas and Spielberg are essentially atheists themselves. And the trouble here is that the theme of not blaspheming and being pious doesn't follow through to the end. And there's a problem here thematically, and that it probably should have leaned a little harder into the Christianity
Hmm.
element, but it didn't. And this was an excellent point he made, and a fascinating. Um, and it's just it was an interesting one. I'm not remembering all the details of his art. I should have written it down. I could probably find it by searching his Twitter page, but I don't feel like going back on Twitter.
You mean you didn't memorize it?
No, I actually decided I didn't want. It was not important enough. No, wait. I have to say it with the Connery. It was not important enough. There. Um. Yeah. Sorry for the rambling.
No, it's okay.
But it. But the scene I think is very interesting. Also, it shows a generational difference, because what's interesting is that I know this might ruffle some feathers, but this is about the time that Christianity is kind of starting to fade from America. While, because it is on the decline in a way from a cultural perspective and a national perspective. We have to bear in mind, um, I would argue Europe had a precipitous decline in religiosity around the time of right after the Second World War.
Hmm.
It had a traumatic effect on Europe. And Canada was at one time more Christian than America. It's just after World War II, it for some reason did a whole bipolar thing of going even more atheist in some ways.
Yeah.
Although it's possible that a good chunk, there are a lot of parts of Quebec which are still like very Catholic. When I say very, I mean like 70%.
So I might have
And
an answer to that statement about the not necessarily like that, because I was doing a little bit of research myself.
well,
So it
the thing is, it's starting. It's not. America's still Christian,
mhm.
is what I mean. Like
No,
it's
no, no,
starting.
no. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, when you said that there was a plot hole there, I found something that might actually lend itself as to why that was.
Okay.
So apparently, let's see. This is basically Sean Connery's, or the notes for Sean Connery being casted as Henry Jones Sr. So Sean Connery is Henry Jones Sr., Indiana's father, professor of medieval literature, who cared more about looking for the Grail than raising his own son. Spielberg had Connery in mind when he suggested introducing Indiana's father, though he did not tell Lucas at first. Consequently, Lucas wrote the role as queasy, eccentric professor resembling Laurence Olivier, whose relationship with Indiana as a strict schoolmaster and student rather than the father-son. Spielberg had been a fan of Connery's work since James Bond and felt that no one else could play the role. Spielberg's biographer, Joseph McBride, wrote that Connery was already the father of Indiana Jones since the series had sprung from the desire of Lucas and Spielberg to rival and outdo Connery's version of James Bond. James Bond films with Connery in it. Connery, who had eschewed major franchise films since his work on the James Bond series, as he found those roles dull and wanted to avoid paparazzi, initially turned down the role.
He was right.
Yeah, he was. He initially turned down the role as he was only 12 years older than Ford, but eventually relented. Connery, a student of history, began to reshape the character, and revisions were made to the script to address his personal concerns. I wanted to play Henry Jones as a kind of Richard Francis Burton, Connery commented. I was bound to have fun with the role of a gruff Victorian Scottish father. Connery believed that Henry should be a match for his son, telling Spielberg that whatever Indy had done, my character has already done and done it better. Connery signed onto the film March 25th of 1988. He improvised the line, "She talks in her sleep," which was left in because it made everyone laugh. In Bohm's scripts, Henry telling Indiana that he slept with Elsa occurs later.
Well, she talks in her sleep was a great line.
That is a great line.
So funny.
So a lot of
I think
the whole point is like Connery probably made some changes or adjustments to the character, and that might have actually led to some of the plot holes that you might have seen.
but the thing is, his revisions are the best part.
They're good for the character.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like I can't imagine this movie without a lot of the ideas that Connery brought
Well,
to the
that's the
role.
mark of an actor that's willing to get into the head of his character and want to make the best representation of that character. Which is funny because some could say the same thing, because I think there's a conversation that came up recently. I know Val Kilmer just passed, but somebody asked an actor if Val Kilmer was difficult to work with, and I don't know if it was Kurt Russell that was asked that question or like any of the other actors, but he said like I didn't meet Val Kilmer. I met Doc Holliday, and I was like, that's kind of a interesting way of putting that. Like, if you're that embedded in the role, or if you're that committed into wanting to bring that character to life, or whatever, I guess it's if you're doing it for the good of the character and the good of the production, or whatever, that's a whole nother level. I can look past certain things that might not necessarily align with that character, or certain choices that might be a little off.
Yeah. And you also, well, one thing I noticed on my last viewing of Batman Forever, ironically, I saw the behind the scenes thing. He played with a lot of the kids that were set.
Yeah.
Kilmer, I mean.
Yeah.
But he was the only actor, it seemed, on set who bothered to play with the kids and pay them any attention.
But Tommy Lee Jones wanted nothing to do beyond that role.
Yeah.
There's a lot of jokes about that.
But the interesting thing is, if you grew up with the 90s cartoon of Batman, and you watch the Val Kilmer movie, his mannerisms, the way he holds and his chin up in a certain way, and the way his speech patterns and the way he deepens his voice, it's just like Kevin Conroy and Kevin Conroy's Batman. I would argue the Batman Forever Batman of Val Kilmer is a 1-for-1 with the 90s animated Batman cartoon.
Yeah, I think Kilmer probably tried to embody a lot of the. Well, I mean, Batman the Animated Series is the pinnacle of what Batman mythos like is to a lot of people. I feel like that's the default or the de facto Batman mythos in a nutshell is that one, because I love the shit out of the Batman the Animated Series. It's one of my favorite cartoons ever. But I think Kilmer's looking at it that way, and I feel like the director was looking at it in terms of Adam West. So like there's two different standards that are at play.
Yeah, although Kilmer, arguably, I'd say he was the second best Batman after Begins with Bale, but in terms of acting, like the actors overall, my favorite, he might rank as my favorite to an extent. Okay. Because he took the role the most seriously, and he certainly treated it with a lot of respect. And I think that's the mark of a professional. And I think Sean Connery bringing medieval, because, well, he loved his medieval history. I think of France, of Scotland. Honestly, the same countries I primarily when I was preparing for my grad studies. It's pretty neat. Yeah. And I actually recently I'm basically pen pals with someone who met Sean Connery and shared dinner with him and hung out in similar circles for a short time.
I would have loved to have dinner with Sean Connery. He probably would have been a wild ride in terms of like just conversation.
Well, apparently she ended up being a mess at first, and almost like almost drinking out of the wrong glass, almost eating the wrong thing, and thinking she was making it either. But then he thought it was so funny. Apparently, he thought it was so funny, and he made sure she relaxed. Like he teased her a little.
Well, it could go one of two ways, considering the Barbara Walters interview. Like it could have went him laughing or him just smacking her. So he did kind of make a big deal about that.
I love that interview. It's like
it is a great interview.
Get a lot of Yeah, it's like, you're gonna get a lot of mail from, and a lot of female, I imagine, from him.
It's like
He was so, he was such a freaking badass.
the Chad meme, the walking Chad meme.
Yeah, yeah. But this person, it's because um, she's she's a stage magician, and she's one of our biggest fans on Substack of our serial fantasy
Okay.
fiction and of some of our fantasy books. I had no idea she met Sean, and she knew him simply as Sean, which I thought that was freaking cool. And she wrote an essay detailing her memory when she met him, and I thought it was one of the neatest, coolest things. And I said, "Wow!" Like growing up, um, I knew him as Draco from Dragonheart,
Yeah.
and this was like in Highlander,
Yeah, for
and
me it was Highlander. That was my
you
first
know,
introduction.
yeah, Indiana Jones. So yeah, Dan and I have met someone, sort of. She's a pen pal because we keep exchanging messages and whatnot. So it's a kind of pen pal friendship. And
It is surreal.
yeah, yeah. And like, but man, it's really freaking.
It's kind of like
And
the 6 degrees of separation.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But Sean Connery really does make this movie.
He makes a lot of
Like I
movies.
know, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
But if only he was Gandalf. If only he was Saruman. I mean, joke. Actually, he would have been a better Saruman.
If they would have made that movie probably about like 10 years earlier or about 15 years earlier, probably. He I think he was at the end he was kind of suffering from dementia, so they kept him out of the public eye for a lot of that time.
Well, around 2001 or like 2000, he didn't have dementia, but he was just. I remember I used to pay attention to a lot of his interviews, and he
Mhm.
mentioned he was just so damn tired
Yeah.
of Hollywood and film, like the business aspect, and so sick of like the Weinstein, well, all the other bean
Well,
counters
it's
as well,
it's
the
it's such a
Epsteins and whatnot.
glamorized like by especially by the mid to late 90s, it was just an over glamorized, overhype kind of atmosphere, and that probably takes a lot out of you, especially when your job is basically to star in movies and pretend to be other people. So you're already kind of
Mm.
emotionally like worn down at the end of the day because you have to show every possible emotion for your character and to deal with bean counters and like scandals and a lot of Hollywood crazy BS in parties and all this other weird stuff like that probably
Yeah,
it's probably soul draining.
yeah. And oh, interesting fun fact: Sean Connery complained because he turned down the role of Gandalf, I think,
Mhm.
and then he later bitterly regretted it. But I think he would have been better as Saruman.
Yeah,
He'd have been perfect.
I really like. Well, I do like Christopher Lee as well. I've been a Hammer fan for a long
I
time,
don't.
so it's hard for
I
me
think
to.
I think Christopher Lee did a good job, but he would have been better as Gandalf.
Actually I
Um,
like oh what's his name for Gandalf though?
McKellen.
Ian
McKellen is good
McKellen.
in
Yeah,
every role. I'll actually go there. He was great in every role except that one, in my opinion. There's just something about the role he just didn't click with, and he didn't seem to understand it, in my
interesting.
opinion.
Okay,
And
I mean,
The other part of me thinks McKellen, he's Magneto.
yeah, I guess
I
he was
I
perfect. And
I feel like he was a weaker Magneto, honestly. I mean, in terms of the speeches, Magneto was fantastic. Just in everything else, I feel like he was underutilized.
that's fair. That's fair. But most of these big actors were really good, and they're
Mhm.
all Shakespearean, and they they committed a lot to their roles, and Connery committed a lot to his. Obviously, you just showed how many revisions he had to do to his character, and I think I like his vision more than I like Lucas's.
I think the
And
one benefit to that was they both, I guess Lucas and also Spielberg kind of
Spielberg,
already had him in mind for the character as or just a character like Sean Connery. So I mean,
yeah,
Sean Connery
and I
basically
think this is
playing
yeah.
himself.
I'm gonna have
Yeah,
to actually eat some of my criticism of Spielberg, I guess, and it's
no,
fine.
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, in that at least he listened to
There's
Connor.
plenty more to kind of criticize Spielberg over, and I'm given the fact that was it Kathleen Kennedy is a product of Spielberg and Lucas's
Dementia.
well, yeah. So we have the forever whatever thing we have to like praise Lucas and Spielberg. They gave us Kathleen Kennedy, so that's a huge red strike.
That's a red flag if ever there was one.
That's a super red flag. That's crimson.
But there's also a great line that they give Henry during the escape, and where Henry is almost acting foppishly, but it's really. But then he, with the pigeons and seagulls.
Oh, the Charlemagne reference. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, but where let my armies be the rocks and the tree and the birds in the sky. In the sky.
I saw that and I was like,
it's like let me.
Oh, it's perfect. It was such a perfect moment. It was kind of one of those things where it's like he's just kind of judging Junior as he's evading the Nazis, whatever, and they get to that point and he's just kind of lackadaisical. And then the bird scene. And then the bird scene happens and it's just like, okay, I see. You guys you're on the same page, you're just approaching this different ways.
Yeah, but the quote's a great one.
It's a fantastic
badass.
quote, yeah.
But it's not historically accurate.
Okay.
Charlemagne never said anything like that.
But it's a damn good line, though. I mean, I guess that goes back to the David Xanatos thing we were talking about, like in the beginning of this. It's like we thought that David Xanatos was attributing Shakespeare, or he's like channeling Shakespeare or whatever, and it was just a David Xanatos line. So it's a Sean Connery line that he just attributes to Charlemagne.
Well, there's a few quotes that we have of Charlemagne, of the actual greatest ruler in European history. Yeah. Pour avoir une autre langue, c'est pour posséder une deuxième âme. To have another language is to possess a second soul.
Okay, I can't refute that. That's actually a really good line.
Laisse la paix, la concorde et l'unanimité règne parmi tous les gens chrétiens, car sans paix, parce que sans la paix, on ne peut pas plaire à Dieu. Let peace, concord, and unanimity reign among all Christian people. Without peace, we cannot please God. There's another line. Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And bonne action est meilleure que la connaissance. Mais pour faire ce qui est bien, on doit connaître ce qui est bien. Right action is better than knowledge, but in order to do what is right, we must know what is right. Interesting lines.
Yeah.
And yeah, honestly, the to have another soul's language is to possess a second soul. I'm trying to wrap my head around because it's not as clear cut as je pense que maybe there's some truth to it in just a literal sense.
Well, the concept
Like you're
is,
two different people.
yeah, the concept is you're
Mhm.
opening yourself up to a whole nother culture, when you speak a different language.
One. But I wonder if how you present and behave and comport and speak and are in that other language is different from in the other one.
Well, you do have to, okay, so when you're adopting another language or you're learning another language and you have to adopt
You
the cadence and the just the
well,
certain
you
aspects of
become
that.
different.
Yeah, it kind of changes you. Yeah, it does change you in a way. So another soul is you're
And
becoming another whole different person.
yeah, because like when I think about it, my comport like I speak two different languages, almost three.
Hmm.
My comportment in Japanese, I'm far more shy when I'm speaking Japanese and dealing with the Japanese. And then occasionally my French bombasticness comes out.
Hmm.
But it's no different than the bombasticness that the Japanese have.
Hmm.
But then in English, we have a, uh, I guess, uh, North American accent, except on occasion. But it's my um, outlooks and attitudes and mores seem more akin to those of the Britain and Ireland I read up about that would be to the 19th century.
Hmm.
But I guess, a different person. But then in French, I've noticed I'm louder and I'm a little more obnoxious, and I I tend to basically behave more like most French and Quebecois.
You're taking on
So
the
maybe there is.
you're taking on
Mhm.
the kind of qualities and cultural things that are tied to that nationality and speak or the country. I mean, there's a level
Yeah.
of bombast that's there in French culture. There's a level of like shy and demurity that exists in like Japanese culture. Those are all things I kind of
Mm,
find appealing. Like it's like
mm.
the Brits. They have their when I watch British comedies occasionally, I mean, the humor is dry, but
Yeah,
like they're witty as
I
fuck.
love. Yeah, they are. I love their wordplay, but when I think about it, like I'm more comfortable in French and amongst all other French. I'm much more at ease with that. So maybe it might be that I'm more myself. But is that not a different soul in a way? So there's a lot of philosophy here, and I think Charlemagne was one of the most intelligent and brilliant men who ever lived.
Well,
Um,
in order to make history, you
well,
kind of have to be.
yeah, especially when you consider that he started with a kingdom and he ended with an empire. Well, like one that spanned like a little more than half of Europe, I think. And he had he had at least one English kingdom as a tributary to him. And like, it's just remarkable. Like, I've had to study his conquest. I think he's the ancestor of us French. I'll crack one joke about the English. They can dream all they want about King Arthur, but the French need not dream because we have Charlemagne. Um, I have to crack that joke. But this
Okay,
is such a great line.
that's fair.
Mhm.
It's a fair statement.
We have to take the piss out of the English every chance, especially in their language. Mais ce qui arrive ici is that um, the one line about what was it? Oh, I went back too much. Let my armies be the rocks and the trees and the sky is a good line. As Charlemagne might well have said if in medieval Germanic, but he probably would have said something like that. So this is a very great line, and whoever the writer was in the room wrote that down, like praise him, like good for him. I hope he earned his money that day because like that is a great line.
I,
Um,
I'll actually talk about it, or no, I'll probably forget about it. But this kind of leads me to down this one thought process of like, so as a kid, Raiders of the Lost Ark was a great movie. Temple of Doom went in an entirely different direction, and that was like one of my favorite films of that time period. And I felt like this was more closer to Raiders, which actually Spielberg kind of states that's the intention. They wanted to go back to the beginning and kind of have more of a tonal movie, because I think Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was responsible for establishing the PG-13 rating because of the pulling the heart out sequence, whatever, that really screwed a lot of kids up during that time period. But I felt like this movie, I don't know why, I just felt like this movie wasn't on the same level as Temple of Doom in terms of just the raw visceral nature. But as an adult, going back and seeing this again, because it's been a long time since I've seen this, going back and looking at this, there's a lot of things I really appreciate about this film.
Yeah, it's the best of the trilogy.
Yeah, it's just I had to age in order, or I had to kind of make my palate a bit more sophisticated in order to be able to understand why this was as good as it was.
Yeah, 1 second. Sorry. He was fussing at the door, then he just turns away and does. And then there's the then you know you have the
city of Alexandretta.
Oh, yeah, and oh man, like, oh wait, we have to talk about the talk about the freaking
the tank
Zeppelin.
chase.
Yeah, the Zeppelin is just, oh my gosh,
no
I
ticket.
love that sequence.
No ticket.
Yeah.
It was a great sequence. That was
how everyone starts.
He handled that. So I was like, how are they going to get out of this? Because obviously the Germans are really good about their checkpoints and their papers. So like, how are they going to get through the checkpoints? How are they going to get actually on the Zeppelin and head there? And him basically cold cocking, well, off screen cold cocking the ticket director, and then taking his costume. It's very cartoonish, but like very stroke of genius.
Yeah, and I think that there's something like, as a kid, I was like, wait, but if the Germans are chasing them, and he's now on a Zeppelin, Germans, why don't they stand up to him and like, why are they just taking him at his word and whatnot? I didn't understand some things, but I'll just comment culturally, having met some Germans as an adult, and they're very intelligent people. Like, they're frighteningly intelligent, but they're ever so gentle. They're very gentle, and they don't like to. They're not the sort of people who pick fights.
Not very conflict minded.
No, they're conflict avoidance obsessed.
Well, I mean, you have to remember, like post-war Germany, there was a lot of
they were traumatized.
Yeah, there's a lot of like making amends and trying to please everyone, and I guess that's kind of been a detriment too, like politically.
Yeah, and the other thing is, we got to bear in mind that World War I was, for lack of a better term, an apocalyptic war.
Yeah,
like,
it killed generations.
Yeah, and here's the thing that I actually recently studied. The country which suffered the most losses, I think like 15 to 25% of the population. And of the entire male population. The entire male population. Just
the events
gone in the blink of an eye.
the events of the First World War were it kind of set the tone for the events that would lead to the Second World War.
Precisely. And that's why, like, the Germans, who were never a people, even looking like 1,000 years back in history, they had a gentle mien. You know what I mean? They were gentle by nature. They didn't like.
They wanted what's best for them.
Yeah, and this is kind of why the Germans did not have like two like France had at one point 200 no, wait, almost 300 years of civil war.
Mm-hmm.
Germany did not have that. Germany basically skidded by. Oh well, we had a bit of a civil strife uh, in the 10th century, and we're just sliding along in peace. Oh, we could have a civil war to decide the dynastic problem now that the dynasty of the Ottonier is dead, or we just have an election and we just decide, okay, let's like have a clean bill here. Like we'll just go into peace.
Okay.
I mean, we'll just avoid all civil war. They avoided the civil war because they didn't want to fight, and this was not just the people, but the nobility were nervous about. You know what I mean? Like, well, we don't want to rock. And this is generally the German mentality. You have that combined with trauma because they lost like at least 15% of their population,
Yeah.
of their male population. So, yeah, this is where, as a kid, I kind of looked at this and went, because, like, if someone said, like, no ticket in that sort of tone, and then demanded a ticket from my dad would have said off. Like, my dad had a confrontational attitude. It's like, I'll give the ticket when I'm good and ready. You can't just punch an officer. My dad had a confrontational attitude, which got him into some trouble sometimes. And the thing is, the Germans didn't react that way. So it confused me. Well, I'm French. So I was like, well, why aren't they being bombastic and like this? They're just throwing their papers. Now, as an adult, you traveled and you met some Germans, you go, oh.
See, I looked at it a little differently because I thought I'm looking at the people that are on this flight, and it's mostly the elite class. So, like, from one, they don't want any trouble, and two, it was like they just want to go on their flight.
Well, we got to bear in mind the Germans were the richest people in the Depression period.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is in 1938, they had the booming economy, so their middle class is really rich. So this isn't exactly the elite, but the middle class, I think. And the middle class Germans are arguably very docile by nature. I don't say that to insult the Germans. I say that as
no, it's just an observation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
the middle class.
Keep in mind, I when we talk about things like this, and this is mainly more to the audience than to us. When we're talking about things like this, it's purely observational, whatever. If you feel a certain way about that, keep in mind that these are all just general observations, just based on the sequence of events in the film. It's
because like I'm looking at it like a historic sociologist and psychologist, like armchair thing, because our mother our mother worked as a associate professor, and so like Dan and I were basically reared. Even though our dad was a train engineer, he was a massive. He loved history, he loved studying and whatnot, and we were like, since the time we were 3, we were reared in a academic or scholarly household, kind of like Indies. So when I say this stuff, it's not with any like emotional investment or anything. Like, you look at the American middle class, they behave a certain way that's very different from, let's say, the Germans or the Japanese, or like, I don't know. I'm not criticizing one or the other. I'm just saying they're all different. But it's just, I was startled as a child by the way the Germans were behaving and confused. Because I thought, like, the Germans we see burning the books were different from the Germans chasing Indy, different from the Germans on the Zeppelin. So this sort of thing just confused me as a kid. And I was just told, don't think about it. It's just a movie. And as an adult on the most recent viewings, I'm always going, oh. And yeah, but this is where I was going to say this knowledge Spielberg and Lucas have, and their writers had, of this kind of sociology and psychology. They were very knowledgeable, and
it wasn't too far removed from that time period too. Like the 80s.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah, we're talking like, what was it, like 50 years off or something like that?
Yep, 50 years. So it's not too far off. And like, But yeah, the Zeppelin scene just with the ticket, like no ticket, everybody just going, okay, don't punch me. That is so hilarious. I still love that sequence.
The airplane
And there's
sequence after that was, I part of me wishes that there was a bit more to that. But yeah, it's I wouldn't expect Henry to be like
a pilot.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that. Or if they were cheeky, since it is Lucas and Spielberg, Henry actually getting one of the pilots or whatever, or just shooting out one of the planes, and then Indy just turning to him and say, "Hey, Dad, don't get cocky." That would have been a nice little cheeky thing, whatever. Tie back to Star Wars, but I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, same. I love how he shoots. That was so freaking hilarious.
Did he get us?
Oh my
more
God.
or less.
It's like more or less. Like that was so hilarious. I like how I always get the impression he did well, where it's like the dad is just like, okay, I'm gonna get yelled at. I don't want to get yelled at. It's almost like what happened with these two characters. It's almost like there's a bit of. I think this is the case with Indy and his dad. There's a bit of parentification that happened.
Yeah, the kind of role flip.
Yeah, as brilliant as the father was, in a lot of ways, Indy had to grow up and become the father to his own dad.
Oh, be the man he wishes his father was.
Yeah, and in a way, it's like when a child is parentified, they become like the legal guardian or like the parent to their own parent. It's mind-blowingly unhealthy in terms of dynamics, but it's something that does happen. And although occasionally it works out, I get, because I know of at least one case where a child was semi-parentified historically, and it's just he had to take a lot of responsibility for.
But Dad, can I talk to myself?
Got up to and did, but then he kind of became besties with his dad. It's a bit of an interesting relationship to study, but that's my alarm. Sorry about that. Sorry. But yeah, more or less.
Yeah. It's, also, we kind of. There's another thing that I didn't realize was a thing, but it kind of lends itself to the set piece aspect. The car that they stole was actually Sala's brother-in-law's car. I didn't notice that, and that's such a set piece kind of. Well, it's kind of a plot convenience.
Yeah, and oh man, like there's so many great set.
It's an interesting. It's one of those things where like you realize a lot of these movies are just a series of coincidences that kind of push the plot forward, but at the same time, it's like it's still entertaining,
still solid.
Yeah, and it leads us to the tank chase.
And yeah, the tank chase is that one is one of the most, how do I put it, gripping pieces. I remember when our oldest brother tried to get me into this movie, and it was like, oh come on. You had our oldest brother who said, "Come, Joe, what would win? A guy on horseback against a tank armed with just a gun, or the tank?" Well, the tank.
You'll think see. The tank. In any other circumstance, any other person, the tank.
But here's the thing. I think I was like 8 or 9.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't trying to convince me to what. No, I think I was a teen. He wasn't trying to tell me I had to watch it. he knew to tempt me, entice me. So I then wanted to see it, and I was blown away.
Yeah.
And I remember our dad going like, "Huh," because our dad didn't learn till a little later yet to entice me, so he was like, "Huh, good job, Chris." Yeah, Chris. Yeah, you gotta know how he thinks. Like,
That's
our
fair.
oldest brother was pretty sly.
There's a level
Yeah.
of psychology involved in kind of getting people to check out certain things. Well, and this kind of leads into I don't want to sidebar too much because we are kind of damn near 2 hours, but no, there's a level of psychology in marketing. There's a level of psychology in sales. There's a level of psychology in advertising. So it makes sense to use those tactics.
And the tank battle is just really one of the greatest action.
It's a damn good sequence.
Yeah,
It's a damn good sequence.
No words can describe it.
It's
and
like,
of course,
there's so many things that made sense, and I mean, there's a lot of cartoon physics that were going on in certain aspects, like the rock in the turret. I was like, but there's so many things that just, if I were in that situation, yeah, I would attempt to do it that way.
Yeah, and you have, of course, the tank after when it goes to tumble down. I love the confession scene on Henry's part. Where he says, I wasn't ready." That was like, I love the vulnerability.
Yeah,
that is one of the best scenes, and it's where we start to see Henry having his journey.
Well,
That's when it begins.
It kind of slightly starts on the Zeppelin when they have the conversation over the drink.
Because like we never sat down and talked. Well, we're talking now.
Yeah, and
it's
you left when it just started you started to get interesting. I was like, yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that, because as a father, if you're raising a kid, is one thing. Like, the kids they're gonna do silly things. They're gonna do things you don't necessarily agree with. When they become adults, when they hit that point of adolescence, or they get a little bit older, and they hit puberty and they start growing into their adult selves, that's when you start seeing like little interesting little things, or whatever, things where you can start having those deep conversations that you wanted to have with them ever since they were a baby, but you knew they weren't necessarily ready for that.
And the problem is, though, Indy doesn't comment.
Yeah, I mean, they look again. It's kind of goes back to that thing with the on the beach with the birds. They are on the same page, but they are going in two different directions trying to achieve the same goal.
Precisely. And of course, it's like, as soon as they bond a little, they immediately have to set off for where the Holy Grail is.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, this is an interesting sequence as well. And a very sly one. Latin, there's no J. Everyone knows what I'm talking. But I really like how Indy's dad is bleeding out, and you've got the father and the son, like with the tracing of the steps and whatnot. But I'd say, had it been me writing, I'd say I would not have it be Jehovah as the name. Because, you can go with, you could go with the actual name, which Yahweh.
Yeah, you could go with Yahweh.
You could go with, or in Latin, Jesus.
Yeah.
Because
that's an I. That starts with I, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, I do remember that. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't know where. Well, I know why they went with the one name, but I'd say it would have made more sense the other way, and it probably would have appealed to American audiences a little.
I think
But
they were going the path of least resistance.
I think they were going. Yeah, I think they were going with. Well, this is where Isaac's essay was really interesting because he said this is the problem of this sequence. It's written by a couple of liberal hippies.
Yeah.
And if they were Christian, they would have known Jesus. And I agree with that sentiment. The trouble was the liberalism clouded and polluted their brains a little so that they didn't. Because in the Bible, God has many names.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're not to take them in vain because, he doesn't like that.
Fair.
But it's still a damn good sequence.
There's a lot of really the bowing at the first trap, the show reverence. I was like, reverence, because after not seeing this for a long time, it's like almost watching it again for the first time. And I was like, reverence means you'd have to bow. So obviously, like, we come to the same conclusion, and apparently there's motorized blades, and there's that, and then the name puzzle, which freaking great booby traps for this movie.
What's that booby trap?
I'll explain later.
And
what's a booby trap? I'll explain later.
Booby trap. Booby.
What caught our eye was the word booby. Let's just be honest. But kids have a one-track mind. But the leap of faith is probably my favorite. These traps.
That's a great trap. That I was like, wait, this has to be an optical illusion. And it
is.
Yeah. It's like if you just had him walking on nothing for the entire thing or whatever, it's probably a great show of faith, but for a lot of people it kind of breaks the immersion because you're going to rationalize your way out of it. But if you make it an optical illusion and something is visually, it's the pathway is there, but you just have to, it's kind of one of those, you got to just kind of close your eyes and go for it. But then if you squint, you actually see where the path really is. Okay, that's smart. That's smart writing. That's really good writing.
It's damn good writing.
Yeah, they don't do stuff like that now. I don't know if people have the capability of pulling off something like that now.
I'll argue there is, but the trouble is that it's not going to come from Hollywood.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be in Hollywood. If somebody that's doing their research and actually knows, or probably spends a lot of time watching older movies or whatever, they would get it. But I don't think Hollywood level writers at this point in time would be capable of pulling off something like this.
It's because they're spiritually and creatively, I don't want to say, I know bankrupt's a popular.
Well, they're definitely limited in their thinking, and they're like just kind of willing to go outside of themselves for answers.
That's exactly it. They're depleted.
And then there are times where the bean counters are the ones that.
Well, there were always. Yeah, like going back to the 70s, according to Don Bluth, there were always a problem. They first began to appear in the 60s at Disney and other film studios, but then in the 70s, they really got power. And in the 80s, there was no shaking them up. And in the 90s, they ruled with an iron fist.
At least in the 80s and 90s, I will say that there was a lot of fighting back and basically like fighting for your artistic vision.
Well, yeah, because the bean counters realized that in order to fight rising indies like Don Bluth, and also fight against the rise of creative films and animation and whatnot, in Japan, for example, they had to start releasing a bit of their control. But towards the end of the 90s, they clenched back down.
Yeah, yeah.
They felt that they had let the genie too much out of the bottle, and they didn't. They actually should have given the artists more, but they were stupid, and
Well,
they still are.
It's
So
exactly
when people
why.
say,
You're going. Go finish your thought.
I was going to say, so when people say, "Oh, millennial writers,"
Mhm.
it's really not millennial writers. Now, I'm not going to actually say the left is. Those are millennials, but they're not representative of an entire generation. Actually, I'd say they're a minority.
Yeah.
And I'll go so far as to say the bean counters, no matter the age group, are a problem. They dictate and they command, and they do not like creative, imaginative stuff.
Yes. Well, that's I'm kind of trying to approach it differently. I notice when we lean into the culture war kind of buzzwords, it turns off a lot of people, or people try to make excuses as to why we're wrong for our thinking in that one. That's why I usually kind of I try to do a roundabout.
No, I wasn't trying to.
No. I didn't take it that way either, but I'm kind of trying to fortify the argument.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
It's like there's a reason why many people in the animation industry use black cauldron, because here it is. The movie was great. In the end, there was supposed to be a sword fight between Terran and the king.
But the bean counters
Interfered and made Gurki jump into the cauldron.
Which makes no sense. But the bean counters ruined that entire.
Yeah.
But by Little Mermaid, they had to release control. The history of the bean counters being in charge of a lot of these studios, such as Disney, is fascinating. Like, I'm sorry, but it's fascinating history.
No, it is.
I also
it
studied
is.
a bit of anime, so it's like it's really, yeah, like it's really interesting.
Well,
I wish there was history courses on that stuff.
yeah.
It's mostly you have to take it when you're made, not just as a professor of just history of animation or something.
Because
I imagine I couldn't.
Yeah, I look at a lot of the '80s films and just the level of just things that were just like, how would you even sit there and come up with an idea like this? That's as I've been going back, I've been dipping a lot into like older films. Well, especially now because a lot of modern stuff isn't really doing it for me. But I go back and I look at all this stuff. I'm like, how would you sit there and come up with something like this? Like there has to be some level of like just. Are you just sitting in a room, like just doing peyote and just coming up with crazy ideas like this? Like what would, and a lot of the stuff, and I was looking at a documentary yesterday. It's right after I watched this movie. I was watching a documentary on just the rise of computer graphics in films, and they were talking about The Last Starfighter and just all the ideas and stuff that they were coming up with. And the bean counter argument does pop up in there too, because they wanted to get that movie done in, what was it, like 6 weeks, or they wanted to have the computer graphic sequences for The Last Starfighter done in a period of 6 weeks, and like all the intricacies of the types of scenes that they were asking for. They calculated it out, the computer graphics team, and they basically found out that it would take them 16 weeks to get all that done. So they had to pick and choose the best things to kind of portray it with the computer graphics that they established. So that whole conversation is there, but it's in bits and pieces. You kind of have to sift around for it like a panhandler.
Well, as to the movie Last Crusade, I like how there is one solid argument here from a Christian perspective that's very interesting, because it's this is a goblet where with how the one guy chooses pork, to quote a certain knight, and because he thinks pearls and gems and whatnot. And this is where I would argue Spielberg and Lucas were probably inadvertently, to an extent, not realizing some of the great symbology here, but they were going for something akin to it. And what I mean is, you have the pearls and the gold and whatnot, and the German chooses the wrong cup and just melts into a puddle of nothing,
Which is
basically.
actually a great effect.
And yeah, and then Indy reaches over, grabs a clay goblet, and
like the cup of a
what I
carpenter,
was going to
basically.
say, yeah. Now, what I was going to say is the great symbolism is that I saw someone post on Twitter, because he's all Christian stuff.
Mhm.
He just spams that stuff. And occasionally I repost it because I think or it amuses me. But um, because I feel my feed is often very tough, color it up with a little wholesome Christianness. And the one quote he said was, "Some kings wore crowns. Mine wore it's like some wore crowns of gold. Mine wore a crown of thorns." And this is a great line. I think this kind of psychologically or symbolically you can apply it here. Like, why would um, he was embodied in the flesh of a carpenter? Why would God then make for himself a cup of gold and pearls? Like, this is where the looking at the characters, just purely as characters, Elsa and the one German obviously never read the Bible. Now, while Indy is an atheist, he did grow up in a Christian Victorian medieval historian's house.
He had to
So
study
the
that.
Bible would
Yeah.
have been there. Yeah. So he know that you've got the first shall be the last and the last shall be.
Well, I mean, this goes all the way back to Raiders. Like, just the things that he already knew kind of helped him locate and figure out how to deal with the Ark of the Covenant. So knowing to shut your eyes, because in the presence of God, one would die if you put eyes on him. Like, that's something that's relayed in the Bible. Like,
that's in I believe Deuteronomy.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, it's been a long time, but yeah, I read all the way up to I think I read up to about Numbers in a summer. That was that was an extensive read.
I'm currently rereading the Old Testament, and the interesting thing is, real quick, is that Moses at one point gets the idea to, and it doesn't turn out very good because it burns his eyes.
Yeah.
And so Maïs doesn't have a good time there, and he gets reprimanded by God for having tried that in the first.
Human curiosity.
It's like, that was precisely the problem, human curiosity. And he had been warned, and he was told, "I know you're going to get curious, but don't do it."
Well, I mean, every time Moses was in the presence of God, he aged. So you would imagine there would be some adverse effects to even attempting to do something on that level.
Yeah, and
all right.
But what's interesting is, now when he stood in the presence of the angel, the idea is the angel of the Lord, when he's in his full majesty, you can't look on. But when he's not, but the angel of the Lord is God. So the interesting thing is here, with the Ark of the Covenant, they were kind of tapping that idea, like you said.
Yeah.
Where, you're in the presence of God. But here, it's basically his goblet.
Yeah.
And you're you know what I mean? It's like, why the hell? It's just, do you know so little about the Christian religion?
I'm curious though, is it because Donovan was he was right there, and this is the one thing he's wanted most of all, and in his rush to like get that fabled immortality, he decided to just anxiously pick up the wrong goblet. And there's another thing that I kind of noticed too that I want to point out. Did Elsa just basically not? She picked out the goblet for him. Was that a double cross sabotage?
I've got an idea. It was now consciously she thought it was the correct one. Unconsciously, it was a double sabotage.
Because that, yeah, once she gets the goblet and leaves, you can kind of see the, oh, again, tonal whiplash of her character where she just gets completely manic. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we have it. We can leave now. No. He told you specifically the goblet cannot cross the seal. You can't have that. That's not yours.
Yeah, and this is where I'm going to disagree with Isaac. He did not like the following sequence. But I'll actually say I think there's some validity to it. And that the interesting thing with this sequence is that now I'll actually say I'll defend the decision by Jones Sr. in that let it go, Indiana. Let it go.
Yeah. It was kind of
it's an important
go on. I think we have the same conclusion, but go on.
It was an obsession. Now,
yeah.
For example, if you say, I noticed this about some people who are like, well, we need to find the Ark, the Covenant again. We need to do this. We need to.
Mm-hmm.
I'll actually argue, let it go. It's not in those physical objects that will God, but in church. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
in Holy Communion and in prayer. It's not, and you have his words in the Bible. You're not going to find it in like a chalice of gold or in remnants of the cross, although those are nice. But you know what I mean? Like
your faith is just as much as important as the artifacts.
Yeah. Now, Catholics think, but you still have to go to church. You have to confess your sins, and you have to admit and humble yourself.
Yeah, some form of being humble in the face of the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, that is what Indiana's dad is calling him to do. He's saying, let it go. That is greed. That is your earthly desire for it. Yes, I know it's the Holy Grail. That is the need to concretize. That is the need to have a physical idol. Yes, It was God's cup. Yep. But the cup is not God. And that is where it is, in that regard, a good sequence from a Christian perspective. And it is important that Indy give his other hand to his father, himself fully to his dad.
Yeah.
Because, honor thy father and thy mother. He hasn't got a mother. He has to honor his father. And like wholly and completely. So in this regard, it is a great sequence, all about filial piety, all about family. Family is a very important.
Yeah, I also kind of looked at it as when she reached for it, it was basically she was interested in the Grail for the wrong reasons. He was interested in it for what he thought was the right reasons, but like ultimately, yeah.
It's a new catastrophe.
Yeah.
It's the wicked will be punished and by their wickedness, but this wickedness and its destruction brings father and son together.
Yeah.
And finally restores the bond between them that they once had when Indy was a child. It restores them together. And so it's one of those sequences which is
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah, it's really well. And of course, the best part is just the um, I like Indiana. We named the dog Indiana.
I have fond memories about that dog.
His like his name is Henry Jones the Third, and I
You're
remember
named
like
after
I got this.
Oh, John Rhys Davies character. You're named after
Yeah,
the
it's like-
dog. Which I feel like John Rhys Davies and oh god, what's his name? From Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
I feel like
Well,
they embody the same spirit sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. I just love the fact that like the dog appears at the beginning.
Yeah, it does.
And-
Like right when he gets into the house, the dog looks at him. Like I like
Yeah.
writing like that too, where it just acknowledges there's certain elements that are there. That
Yeah, and we don't know the significance of the dog until the last scene.
mhm.
That is such a great that's it ties the thing together. But what I like is that um Indy and his father, there's that moment of bonding.
Yeah.
And but what's interesting is I actually, when I first went to Japan, I met someone who was well, the fur, you know what I mean? Like his dad was junior and he was I'm not gonna say his name.
Yeah. I've also met somebody that was the fourth. That was an interesting thing.
Well, my friend actually said it messed me up being the fur. So just call me by my first name and we'll just pretend I'm not the fur. Okay, junior. And him, he was like,
Like just imagine
But
being the
he-
fourth
he-
in line though. Like you're like, and he has kids of his own, but he chose not to continue on that name, which was interesting.
come on, the fifth.
Yeah, you
Like,
become a
if he's
duke at
like,
that point.
yeah.
You think you automatically become a duke or a
Yeah.
lord or something.
Yeah, agreed. So you might have like, let's say you're Rebel the fifth. Well, that's pretty cool. Although if you're something like George Edward, well, I can't approve.
No, George Foreman. All of his children were named George.
Yeah. Well, I don't like the Georges of Great Britain because the Hannah House. I like
Fair
the
enough.
Stuarts better. Yeah. As for the Edwards, well, they were almost all enemies of France. So, but I will admit, Edward the Fourth, funny and interesting in some ways. To hate to actually hate at all, and Edward the fifth, nobody thinks about him, and Edward the sixth is interesting. I like Edward the sixth. I really like him. And Edward the seventh. Which one was that? Oh well, must not have been important if I can't remember. I'm joking. I doubt he or his wife. Actually, I know who. I think I got a good idea. He was the king in the 20s, I think. Not these 20s, but 100 years ago. Gosh, is it already years? But anyways, yeah. So that great sequence, and the riding off, great way to end the saga. That ends the entire series.
Yes. As
Really
far as
well.
I'm concerned, that is the end of the series, and it doesn't go on beyond that at all.
It probably shouldn't have continued, but this is the problem with sloppy. They don't know when to stop.
Well, that's my point. It's like, I mean, the Young Indiana Jones series should have been the continuation, and that should have been where it ended, because that actually felt like it was tied to the main series, and there was a legitimate ending because this old Indiana Jones regaling tales of his youth or whatever. That's a great way to finish that off. The latter,
Yeah, to his kids and great grandkids.
yes, exactly. I don't.
At Thanksgiving.
No, anytime that somebody tries to continue something that's already had a great trilogy to it, it's done almost I would assume just off of a principle that this is done maliciously because you want to outdo the original trilogy and you feel like you have to add some twist thing in order to put your spin on it, therefore destroying the entirety of that thing that you claim you love so much. I'm looking at you, Star Wars.
Our dogs.
And he's insisting on
Teeth brushing.
Yeah.
We don't say him because he knows the term in French,
Mhm.
and he'll get excited and perk up.
Oh, it's like WALK.
Yeah, except he knows it in French. We raised him in French, so he knows that.
That's
So
interesting.
when we're speaking in code, we use English. Hello, Jet. Qu'est-ce que tu fais? Looking at me. But I guess that's just it. Jin didn't show up because he was busy.
He kind of was looking forward to Saturdays, so this might have threw his game off, but it's okay. There's plenty of other episodes.
If only we knew what movie he'd want, we could go with what he'd want for next week.
Go ahead and DM him on Twitter, and we'll go from there. I don't really again, if we have to reschedule at a time that's convenient for all of us, I don't mind that so much. It's just like as long as we know like a decent time beforehand.
Yeah, it's just it was just the other day that everything.
Yeah, I get it. It's kind of one of those things where it's weird for me too, because there's times where I was Saturday, I'm like, okay, I can do this, and then there's other times where the kids might want me to take them somewhere, and so it kind of throws things off.
Yeah. Well, what should we watch next? It's Easter, so
I might have to, if we do the Easter one, we might have to do that a little bit earlier on in the week or kind of towards the end of the week. Just because I know Sunday for sure I'm going to be busy with family stuff because we're doing Easter dinner.
It might be easier on a Thursday or something.
Yeah, or Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday or Thursday would probably be, given the religious connotations.
Yeah.
We might have to go with a religious movie. Let me see.
Ten Commandments.
Watched.
That's a long movie though.
We watched. Yeah. I think we did Paul Apostle of Christ already.
Mm-hmm. Like my go-to would be Ten Commandments, but that's almost 3 hours. So I can understand not wanting to do that.
There's so much we'd have to divide it into multiple episodes.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It is one of my favorite movies though. Like growing up, every time it came on television, we watched it. It's a whole family event.
Well, we could always do that like as a like Days of Christmas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like do it like 1 week after later.
Kind of like a multi-part series.
Yeah. I don't know about doing it this week. I'm sorry.
Yeah, like I said, that's a lot, and even
it's on short notice and whatnot. Well, wait, there might be one movie I could think of, flirting with religion, but still kind of like a Flash Gordon type adventure. Now that I think about it, The Librarian, The Spear of Destiny.
I have not seen that before, so that would be a first time watch for me.
Well, it takes a lot of cues from Indiana Jones.
That's a good lead in, or actually that would be a primer into that. So
but the main character is set, like the story is set in the modern age.
Okay.
He's got to find the spear that pierced Jesus' side.
Yeah, Longinus Lance.
Yeah, and he think of it as he has a Indiana Jones level adventure ahead, but he's a nerd and pretty much an incel. So, but it's in like 2007. So it's like it's really interesting seeing this guy who think more Henry Jones, but in the body of like a 30-year-old.
It reminds me of I don't know if you ever saw Roar.
No.
There's
No.
it was kind of a TV series. It was short lived, and it kind of stemmed from the search for the Lance of Longinus. And I want to say the main villain was the Centurion that pierced Christ's side. He was doomed to immortality as punishment and became a villain. I think the spear was the only thing that could relieve him of or that could finally kill him.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of old stories about the actual Longinus dying a martyr, preaching in, I think, Asia Minor.
Oh, that's kind of reminds me of Dracula 2000, where Dracula in that lore was Judas Iscariot.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah,
Interesting twist.
it's interesting plot, but the movie wasn't really that great.
Yeah, I remember that one. But I think you'll like Library. It's funny, it's witty, but what's more is that it's a family movie. Like you can watch it with the wife and kids and have a great time.
Okay, I will put that on the docket then.
Okay. And maybe we could let Jin choose the one.
Yeah, you can do the one after.
Yeah, because like I said, I really want him around episodes because he's I really like his sense of humor, and I think he always makes these observations, and it livens up the debate and the conversation.
He's a very great co-host. He really does kind of
like
he evens me out.
He's also really yeah, he's also really smart, so it helps. I still have to get caught up on Real Negroes and watch the latest episode.
The latest episode was interesting because it was basically a huge critique of the 80 Shankar series, Castlevania and Devil May Cry. That's been a very contentious subject as of late.
What's interesting is when I wrote my article on Substack about the DMC thing, I commented that I found that because my main familiarity with DMC is from the anime 2007.
Yeah.
And the themes in there were very much like big brother, little sister. It was very much about family.
Yeah.
And
because there's a lot of familial elements in that series.
Yeah. And I just think I really like that anime. And I just think that this new cartoon, I'd have no interest in looking at it. And I said, what they don't understand is that family is at the core of it, because Dante has a failed relationship with his brother, but a successful Patty.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the contrast thing. And Dante himself is supposed to be a bit of a character in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
As, there's some, but anyways, but he's a character who overcomes it with a lot of smarminess. And a lot of strawberry sundaes and pizza.
Mm-hmm.
Can't forget pizza.
Or the strawberry sundaes. But yeah, anyways, I guess I'll just use this opportunity to plug the Substack, which not my best lead in, but
no, you're good. You're good. This was a very it was a longer episode than we normally do, but it actually had a lot of great substance. So
okay. Well, my Substack is over the brothers Krynn. It's over on Substack, like I said, and we are almost at 2,000 subscribers.
Ooh.
And almost at 100 paid subscribers. But for now, it's at 30 cents to $1 is how much we're going to be charging right now for a full year's subscription. So we're having a big Lent sale.
Okay.
Why not? It's one of the most a guy dared us to, essentially. Well, not in so many ways, but he's like, well, I'm going to do this. And I said, well, mind if I do it? Yeah, sure, go ahead. It'll be funny. So it was like a bit of it'll be funny. We're not going to make any cash out of it, but yeah, who cares? And we've also got the third edition now of Crown of Blood is out, which has the map, the character, like the Domatis Passone did it, and a lot of other little new details in there. The book's better formatted, so we got that also. Which when I download the podcast and upload it to YouTube, I'll be sure to put all this stuff in the description on my end.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I'll also have to definitely plug the full screen boss fight, best channel on Rumble. Goes without saying. Yes.
Yeah, I just wish Rumble had better means of displaying us to other people. And maybe that's a me thing. Maybe that's something I need to work on. But
I
don't know. Rumble's kind of been a little weird lately. I think they're making adjustments and trying to improve on it. So we'll see how it goes.
You could always also upload this to Substack.
I could do that. And I've been actually I got some things I want to write out. They're basically, it's harder to make videos because obviously baby and other stuff. So I'm kind of leaning more into writing out articles based on my thoughts of what's currently going on in the video game industry over actually doing videos.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just happy so long as we keep up the movie club of sorts, because it's just sometimes fun to just.
And these are always work out because they're it's kind of like little, it kind of cross promoting, and it also covers things that we like.
Yeah. And and it's just fun to just talk movies and whatnot sometimes, because like I said, I bask in the knowledge that you have, because you know way more about movies than we do.
I was a latchkey kid, and it shows.
Same. But I also helped out as a local book critic as a kid. So like I'd write 3-sentence, well, not 3 sentences, but I had to write little articles for books. So I went into books, you went into movies.
That's fair.
Balances out. We couldn't afford most movies. I had to borrow the books and basically read them. And I was only allowed them for like a week.
I was a bit of a library rat for a period of time too. So I hung out in libraries and just kind of, I was getting shunned by a lot of the kids my age because why are you going into libraries and reading books? Are you some type of nerd? Like, no, I like knowing things. I love knowing the idea of knowing things.
Well, we gotta get going.
Yep. I gotta.
All right. Let us know when what day and time you want.
Okay.
Your Thursday. You could decide it with Jin what time would work, and like everything would fit him, and we'll fit it into our schedule.
That works, because I was gonna say definitely this weekend. I'm probably going to be away from the computer and kind of away from like out and about doing things because Easter weekend. But we'll sort out something.
Yeah, Easter weekend is tough. I think it's just hard, just overall. So, anyways. See you around.
Yes. Thank you guys.
Enjoy your family.
Yep. Thank you guys for joining us for this episode, and we will see you next boss fight. Take care. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Take care. Take care.